Imagine missing your flight because the
Oh.
airport security line stretches for like 2 full hours, right? And it's all because lawmakers in Washington are locked in a fierce battle over a $191 billion budget.
Yeah, it sounds like an absolute travel nightmare. But for millions of people standing in airports right now, checking their watches, panicking as their boarding time just slips away, it is their harsh reality.
Right. So today we are doing a deep dive into how a massive political fight in Washington over border funding is the exact reason you might miss your flight out of Atlanta or Houston today.
Exactly. We are looking at a really fast-moving crisis here. The Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, is partially shut down.
And because of this, TSA officers, the screeners we all rely on, they have been forced to work without pay for over 5 weeks now.
And the strain on the system is incredibly visible. Over 300 TSA agents have simply resigned. They are just walking away to find jobs that actually print a paycheck.
Oh, wow. And the results are chaotic.
Yeah.
Like if you are flying through major hubs like Newark or Atlanta, wait times are easily hitting 90 to 120 minutes.
Right. And missed flight connections have spiked from a normal 1.6% all the way up to 8%. U.S. airlines are losing an estimated $180 million every single week this continues.
Corporate travel departments are actively telling you to arrive 3 hours early for a domestic flight, 4 hours early for international.
Which completely upends the entire travel industry.
Totally. So our mission today is to unpack the standoff causing all of this. We have been digging through a stack of sources, including a really detailed financial analysis from the advocacy group FWD.us, alongside multiple on-the-ground news reports.
Right. We are going to look at a historic $191 billion border funding bill, the tragic events that sparked the current deadlock, and what both sides of the political aisle are demanding to fix it.
Because the connection between a massive border security bill and the line at your local airport might seem like a stretch at first.
It does, but it is actually a very direct mechanical link.
Okay, let's start right there. If you are standing in that agonizing TSA line in Atlanta, you are probably asking yourself, how does a fight over immigration policy stop the security line at the airport?
Right. Like, are they even the same thing?
Exactly.
Well, it all comes down to the federal organizational chart. The TSA, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which we know as ICE and Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, they do not operate independently.
They all fall under the exact same umbrella.
Yes, the Department of Homeland Security, they share the same federal roof. So when Congress completely stops the general funding for the overall department, well, the paychecks for the TSA agents screening your bags stop too.
Here is the thing that I think will confuse a lot of people, because it definitely confused me when I read the FWD.us report. Our sources show that these immigration agencies just received a historically massive amount of money.
They did. Back in July of 2025, Congress passed a massive piece of legislation called a reconciliation bill.
And this specific one was known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
Exactly. And it awarded a historic $191 billion strictly for DHS enforcement.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. What exactly is a reconciliation bill? Why does it matter that they use this specific process?
That is a great question. The mechanism here is crucial. Normally, to pass a major law in the U.S. Senate, you need 60 votes to overcome a filibuster, right?
Right. And getting 60 out of 100 senators to agree on anything is incredibly difficult.
Exactly. But a reconciliation bill is a special type of law linked to the federal budget. It allows Congress to pass certain spending and tax measures on a fast track.
Oh, so it bypasses that 60-vote roadblock.
Yes, meaning you only need a simple majority of 50 votes to pass it.
So they essentially used a legislative fast pass to push through $191 billion. Let's break down where that money is actually going, because the sheer scale of these numbers is just hard to wrap your head around.
The breakdown is massive. ICE receives $74.85 billion.
Like 74 billion?
Yeah, $74.85 billion. To put that in perspective, that is nearly 9 times its entire budget from just the year before in 2024.
9 times. That is wild.
I know. And that money specifically funds 100,000 detention beds and hires 14,593 new officers.
And then Customs and Border Protection gets, what, $64.73 billion?
Yes, which includes $46.6 billion designated just for building a border wall.
Let's visualize that for a second. 14,593 new officers. That is not just a hiring surge. That is the equivalent of hiring the entire population of a small town just to work as federal enforcement agents.
And then there is the part of the bill that the financial reports flag as a slush fund.
Right, the $22 billion fund.
Yeah.
Our sources say this is designated simply as unspecified enforcement funding.
Wait, let me stop you there. $22 billion with zero oversight.
Pretty much, yeah.
How is that even legally possible in a federal budget? Didn't anyone demand a breakdown before voting?
Well, because it was passed through that fast-track reconciliation process, the specific line items weren't heavily debated. The bill simply provides the cash without specified programmatic breakdowns.
So no reporting rules or oversight requirements at all. Right. It is like giving a contractor a blank check for $22 billion to build a house for you and never once asking for a receipt, a blueprint, or an inspection.
You just hand over the cash and legally they don't have to tell you what they bought with it.
To give you a sense of scale, that $22 billion unspecified fund alone is larger than the annual budgets of the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, and the U.S. Marshals combined.
Which brings us to the most glaring logical question. If Congress fast-tracked this bill and DHS has all this money from last July, why is the government shut down right now?
Right, why not just pay the TSA?
Exactly. If they have billions sitting in the bank, why can't they just cut the TSA agents a paycheck from that pile?
Because federal funding doesn't work like a personal checking account where you can just move money around. The money is legally siloed.
Meaning what, exactly?
Strict federal appropriations laws dictate that money approved specifically for a border wall or ICE detention beds absolutely cannot be moved to pay the salaries of TSA screeners.
Got it. So they're rich in one account and bankrupt in the other.
Exactly. And second, the current standoff isn't over getting the money. As of early 2026, around $150 billion of that funding remains completely unspent.
Wow.
Yeah. The fight paralyzing Washington right now is over how that money and the power that comes with it is being used on the ground.
And there was a very specific tragic catalyst that brought this to a boiling point.
There was. In two separate incidents in Minneapolis, federal immigration agents fatally shot two U.S. citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy.
And following those tragic shootings, congressional Democrats completely blocked any further general funding for the Department of Homeland Security.
They basically threw the emergency brake on the entire department.
Imagine finding out
According
your
to the
electric
reporting,
bill
Democrats
is
are
secretly
demanding a
funding
series
the
of
government's
strict
massive
reforms,
spending addiction,
what they call
It
guardrails,
is a pretty
before they
shocking
will agree
realization
to
when you
reopen
actually
the
look at
government
the
and
math.
fund the
Right.
TSA again.
Well,
And those
imagine
democratic
for a second
demands
that you
are
have a
highly
savings account.
specific to how agents
And,
operate in the field.
uh,
They want to
you swore to
completely
your
ban
family, hand
immigration
over heart,
agents from wearing masks.
that this
Okay,
money
what
was
else?
strictly
They
for
want to
fixing a
require
leaking
all
roof.
agents to wear
You said,
body cameras
if we don't
and
fix this
highly
roof,
visible ID at
the
all
house
times.
is going to collapse.
It's an existential crisis for the House.
Exactly.
They want
It's
to
the Save the House
mandate
fund.
judicial
But then,
warrants
your car breaks
before
down,
federal
you spend a
agents
little too
can
much on
enter any
groceries, you've
private
got bills
property.
piling up.
They're also
So what do you do?
demanding an
You
end
rate
to
the
racial
roof
profiling
You take
and
that
stricter
money,
use of
pay off your
force
credit
standards.
cards,
Right?
and tell your
Exactly.
family,
What's
hey, don't worry,
fascinating
we'll
here
fix
is
the
trying to
roof
understand the
later.
exact
And
mechanics
in this
of the
scenario,
deadlock.
the
To
roof is the
really
planet, or at
grasp
least Maryland's
why the
climate
government
goal.
is shut down,
And the car
we
is
have
a
to look
massive,
impartially at the
self-inflicted
Republican and White House defense.
$1.5
Right, because
billion
they are looking
state
at
budget
these
deficit.
exact same
completely
demand and
avoidable
coming to a
deficit, I might add.
completely different
Welcome to the
conclusion.
deep dive.
Right. So what is their
Today we're
mechanical
exploring a
pushback
classic
against these
case
guardrails?
of fiscal sleight of
Let's take
hand
masks,
coming out
for
of
example.
Annapolis.
The Democratic
We're looking
demand
at
is
the
transparency,
Strategic Energy
but
Investment
Republicans
Fund,
argue that forcing
SAFE.
immigration agents to unmask
It's a huge pot
puts
of
those
money
officers
meant
and their
to save the
families at
environment.
severe risk of
But it's
doxing
turning
and
into a
physical
hidden
harm.
tax
Exactly.
on every
Let's
single
define doxing
person
for a second, just to
paying
be
an
clear on what
electric
the threat
bill
actually
in
is.
Maryland.
Doxing is
It
when
really is. It's
activists
become the
or
center of a
individuals
huge
find out
political
someone's
fight.
real identity
You've
and
got a
publish their
Democratic
private
governor,
information
frustrated
online.
environmentalists,
Their home
making
address,
some
their
very
phone
awkward
number, where their kids
compromises.
go to school,
And conservative
which is
critics who
incredibly
are
dangerous.
rightly
Yeah.
calling this
Republicans
whole thing a
argue
shell
that
game.
in
A
the
shell
current
game.
highly charged
And when you look
political
at the
climate,
documents we have
allowing
today,
agents to wear
reports,
masks
budget
protects them and
proposals,
their
critiques
families
from
from
Senate
being targeted
Republicans,
at their
it
private
is
homes.
really hard to
So
unsee
it is a
Our
direct
mission for this deep
clash
dive is simple.
between
Follow the
demands
money.
for public
Always
accountability
follow the money.
and
We are going to
demands for
see
officer
how
safety.
a fund designed to fight climate
Is there
change
any room
is
for
being used to plug
compromise?
holes in the state budget.
Or are both sides
And we'll dig into the
completely locked
argument
in?
that this
Well,
isn't found money
the White
at
House
all.
has
This
offered
is essentially a
some
backdoor
concessions to try to
tax
break
on
the
families.
stalemate.
Let's get
They
right
have
into
indicated
it.
they are
The
open
Strategic
to
Energy
implementing the
Investment
body
Fund. It sounds
cameras
very
and the
official,
visible IDs.
very important.
But they are firmly
What does it actually
rejecting
do?
the ban
Well,
on masks.
Yes,
on
and they
paper.
completely
It is the
reject
state's
the strict
green
property
piggy
warrant
bank.
rules.
This
The
IIF
White
is
House
managed
argues
by
that
the
Democrats
Maryland
are essentially
Energy
trying to
Administration. Its whole
defund or
stated
purpose
purpose
is
is
to
to
reduce
the back
energy
door.
bills,
Meaning they think
cut
these strict
waste, and
rules would make it
fund
functionally
renewable
impossible
energy.
for
Like
federal
solar
agents
panels
to
and
do their
efficiency
day-to-day
upgrades.
jobs.
Exactly.
I
But
want
here
you,
is the real aha
listener,
moment
to
of
think
the
about
story.
being an unpaid TSA agent
Where
right
does the
now.
money actually
You are
come
waking up
from?
at 3 a.m. to
Because
go
they aren't
screen
just
bags.
taxing you directly.
You are
for
worried
it.
about how you're going to pay
No,
your
and that's why
mortgage this
politicians
month.
absolutely
And
love it. It feels
you
free.
are caught
So about
completely in the
40%
middle
comes from
of a
regional carbon
massive
auctions.
high-stakes
the big chunk,
ideological
the one
battle
growing
over
like crazy,
masks,
comes with something
warrants,
called
and federal law
alternative
enforcement
compliance
tactics that has
payments,
absolutely
or
nothing to do with
ACPs.
airport
Which is just a
security.
fancy
Your
government term for a
livelihood is
fine.
right,
Quite literally
it's a fine for
being
failure.
held hostage
Let me break it
by
down.
a fight
Maryland
over
law
immigration
forces
policy.
utility
It is a
companies to buy
devastating
a
position
certain
for
amount
those
of
workers.
green energy.
But that
They
fight
have
over
proved they're
immigration
using renewables.
policy and this
But if
historic
they can't find that
influx
green
of
energy,
cash
or if it's just
is
way too
rippling
expensive on the
out
market,
way
which it
beyond
usually
the
is.
airports
Yeah,
and
the
the
state
border.
gives them
Oh,
an
for
escape
sure.
hatch.
The sheer
The
scale of this
utility can just
enforcement
pay a
buildup
fee
is
directly to the
actively
state instead.
transforming local
That fee
communities
is
all
the
across the
ACP.
country.
Yeah, for
And here's the
example, the
kicker.
sources heavily detailed the
Utilities are
massive expansion of
increasingly
something called the
just paying the fines because
287
it's
gram
cheaper than
program.
actually
But
buying
wait,
the
if
green
Customs
energy.
and Border
Wait,
Protection
so
and
the
ICE
climate
are
fund is
federal
getting
agencies,
incredibly
how are
rich.
local police in my town suddenly getting
Precisely
involved in this? Are they just
because the green
volunteering their
energy
time?
mandates are
Not
failing.
exactly.
Precisely.
The 287
It is a
gram
completely
program
perverse
essentially
incentive.
deputizes
The
local
government
police
made the
officers
mandates
and
so
county
aggressive
sheriffs
and
to
the market
act
is so
as federal
distorted
immigration
that power
agents.
companies
wow.
are just
And
writing
because
checks
of
to
the
the state
massive
instead of going green.
$191
And the
billion
stats on this are
funding
just
surge,
staggering.
this
They
program
are.
has expanded
In
by over
2022,
900%.
this revenue was
900%.
$77 million.
That is huge.
By
Yeah,
2025,
more than
it jumped to
760 local
$365
law
million.
enforcement agencies
Wow.
across the
From
country
77
have now
million
signed
to
up to participate.
365 million in
Walk
3
us through
years.
how
Right,
that
so now the
works in
state has
practice.
this
Like, what does it actually
massive
look like for a
accidental
listener
pot of gold.
in one of these
It's
towns?
supposedly
Well,
for green
in practice,
projects.
it means
But
that
remember,
a
that money
routine
didn't just fall
interaction
out of
with
the
local
sky.
law
The
enforcement
utility
can
companies paid
instantly
those
become
funds.
a federal
And do you think
immigration
those massive
check.
corporations
so like a
just
traffic
eat that
stop.
cost out of
Exactly.
the goodness of
Let's
their
say a
hearts?
local police
Oh,
officer
absolutely
pulls
not. They
someone
pass
over for a
every
broken
single
taillight.
penny of that onto the customer.
Under this
Exactly, it
deputized
shows up
program,
right on your
that
electric
local
bill.
officer
So
is
you,
now
the
heavily
everyday
involved
ratepayer,
in
are
enforcing
paying
federal
for the
immigration law
utility's
during
failure
that
to
stop.
meet a government
So
mandate.
they are trained
The
and
state collects
authorized
your money,
to
drops it in the
identify
safe,
and
and
process
says, "Look at all this
undocumented
cash we have
individuals
for the
on behalf
climate."
of ICE.
Which brings us to
Exactly.
the raid.
That is a fundamental shift
Because that
in
money
how
is
local
definitely
police
not
operate.
staying in
You
the
go from
climate
local
fund.
community
Not
policing
anymore. Enter
to
Governor
federal
Wes
enforcement.
Moore.
It really is.
His
But there's
administration
another
is
ripple
staring
effect
down
here,
a
and this one
projected
could potentially impact
$1.5
almost
billion
every American
budget
listener,
deficit.
regardless of where they live. It's the financial trade-off.
billion.
Right, the money had to come
You
from
can't just
somewhere.
ignore
Exactly.
a hole that deep. To
can't.
fund this historic
And when government
$191
overspends to
billion
that
buildup,
degree, they
Congress
start
couldn't just
checking
print
under
it.
the couch
According to the
cushions for loose
detailed
change.
FWD.us
Except here,
financial
the couch
report.
cushion is the
To
green
pay
energy
for this
fund,
border and
the
enforcement
loose
buildup,
change is hundreds
Congress
of millions
cut
of taxpayer dollars.
$911
So what's the
billion
actual proposal? How
from
much are they
federal
taking?
health care
The
programs.
governor's
Wait,
plan diverts
$911 billion?
$292 million.
Yes, and it was in the
directly
exact
from the
same
SIF into the
reconciliation bill,
state's
same
general
piece of
fund.
legislation,
Just to
same
balance the
vote.
books. Hold on,
Just to
let's make
cover
that
their
real for a second.
overspending.
We throw around
They
words like
are using
billions
energy
and
fines
trillions
to pay
so
for
often in
general
Washington that they
government
lose all meaning.
operations.
They really
Bureaucracy,
Cutting nearly
salaries,
$1 trillion
office supplies,
from
you name
healthcare,
it.
but that's
to
not
pay
even all of
for
it.
enforcement.
I read in the
It's not
sources
just
there's
an
also a
abstract
rebate
spreadsheet
change.
Yes. This is
What
the
does a
part critics are
$911
calling a
billion
political
cut
sweetener.
actually
They're grabbing
do
another
to the medical system?
$100
The
million
human impact
out
of
of
that
the
fund
fund
to give a
the
one-time
FWD.us
$40 rebate
polling
to
and data
eligible
analysis
households.
suggests that
$40.
7.5 million
So let me
people
get this
could
straight.
lose their Medicaid
The state
coverage
mandates
entirely
drive
by
up
the year
energy
2034.
costs just because of those. The utility
specific funding
companies
cuts.
pass those
Exactly.
massive
So we're talking about a
costs to
listener's
you and
neighbor
me. losing their
Our
Medicaid.
bills go up
We're
by
talking about
hundreds of
families who
dollars a
rely on
year.
that program to get their
And
kids
then the governor
an asthma
takes a
inhaler.
chunk of our own money,
and it cascades
hands
down
us
to the
back a
hospital
crisp
level too.
$40
Surveys
bill
in the sources
and
show that
basically
over
says,
80%
"You're welcome."
of
That is
physician
the
groups
exact
expect
math.
to be
It's
forced to
wild.
cut
And if you look at
services
the
due to
recent
the
supplemental
reduced federal
budget, they're
funding.
cutting or
80%.
shifting another
Yes.
$80 million.
And the
when you
specific
add all
services
this
they're
up,
targeting
this
for
raid
cuts are
depletes the
pediatric
fund by
care
82%.
and maternity
82% of the
Wow.
fund wiped
So
out.
a rural
Wiped out.
hospital that
leaving only
relies
about
on
$164
federal
million
healthcare
for the
funding to keep the
actual
lights on
green
in the maternity
initiatives it
ward
was legally meant
Might
for.
have to close
That
that
is not a
ward down.
trim.
Right,
That's
because
a
that
total
money was
gutting.
redirected
And
to
this is
fund
where
the
the politics gets
14,000
super
new
interesting.
federal
Because you would
officers
assume the
and the
environmentalist groups like the
100,000
Sierra
detention
Club
beds.
or the
If we
Chesapeake
connect
Climate
this to
Action
the bigger
Network,
picture, this is
you'd
not just
assume
a
they'd be
debate about border
furious.
security.
They were.
No, not at all.
Initially,
This is a
when
fundamental
this first
seismic
leaked, they
shift
called it
in our national
unacceptable.
spending
They said it
priorities.
was a
Just to put the
huge
sheer
mistake
scale
to
of
use
this
this
new
money as a
enforcement
petty
infrastructure into
cash
perspective,
drawer.
the
But
combined
then they
annual
folded.
budgets for
completely
ICE
folded
build it.
and CBP
Now they are
are now
actually
larger
supporting
than
parts
the
of the
entire
governor's
state budgets
spending
of places
plan.
like Oklahoma
Talk about
or Alaska.
strange bedfellows.
Think about that.
Why on
We're
earth
talking
would they
about
do
building
that?
a federal
If
law
they truly
enforcement
believe climate
apparatus
change
that
is an
exceeds the
existential
entire
crisis,
military budgets
why
of
let the
all but
state
6
raid the
countries in the
survival
world.
fund? Which is just
It's
staggering.
just raw
And here's
political
where it gets
calculation.
really
They know
interesting.
voters are
So
getting
what does
crushed
this
by
all mean
inflation
for
and
you,
high
the
energy bills
listener?
right now.
Right, bringing
If
it back
these
to those
green groups
airport
attack a
lines.
$40
Exactly.
rebate,
The
even if it's a
agonizing
total
2-hour
gimmick,
TSA lines
they
you
look
might
like they don't
experience at
care
the
about
airport
working
this week,
families.
so they have to play the game. They
They
are
are
basically
swallowing
just
a
the
very
check
bitter
engine light
pill.
blinking
In
on your
exchange for
dashboard.
letting
They're
the
just the
governor
visible
raid the
symptom
fund
of a
today,
much larger
they are
mechanism.
lobbying
The
for
real
a new
story
law
we're
to
looking
create a
at
funding
is
floor
that
in
the
the
entire
future.
engine
Meaning
of
what
federal law
Meaning
enforcement
they want to
is being
guarantee
completely
that the state
rebuilt
will
under the hood.
mandate
roughly
It is a historic
$365 million a
$191
year
billion
on climate spending
transformation.
So
and
they
the
are throwing
intense,
today's
unyielding
taxpayers
political
under the
deadlock
bus
in
Washington
to lock
right
in
now
a permanent
is
claim on your
entirely
wallet later.
over how
That's
that
the
immense
gamble.
power
And
is
it brings us
regulated
right
and
to the
overseen on
core
the streets.
conservative
Which raises an
critique.
important question.
People
And
like
it's something
Senate
I wanna
Minority
leave you to
Leader Steve
ponder
Hershey
long after
aren't
we finish
buying
today.
this spin
With
at all.
$150
Not for a
billion
second. Let's walk through their
still sitting
argument, because it
unspent in
really
the bank,
exposes the
this
math
enforcement
here.
funding is
They call it
already
the
locked
hidden
in.
tax.
It will
Right.
last until the
Let's
end of
be
2027
rigorous about
without
this logic.
Congress needing to authorize
Step one,
another dime.
the state forces
Even
a
if
green
lawmakers
mandate that is totally
miraculously
disconnected
agree
from
on mask
economic
policies
reality.
and
Step
warrants,
2,
and they
the
resolve the
utilities can't
TSA
meet it,
crisis
so they pay the
tomorrow,
massive fine.
this
Step
massive
3,
enforcement
utilities
infrastructure
raise your
is
electric
already
rates to
paid
cover
for
the
and
fine.
moving
And
forward.
step 4, the
So the
state
question
grabs
is,
that fine money
How will
to
the
pay
sheer
for
scale
general
of these new
government bloat.
facilities
Exactly.
and the
So, in
thousands
effect,
of newly
the state
hired
is
federal
taxing
agents
electricity users
permanently
to pay for
reshape the
DMV
relationship
or
between
state
your
salaries
local community and
without
federal
ever
law
having to
enforcement
publicly
over the
vote
next
on a
decade.
tax hike.
It is a
Hershey says
massive
Maryland
question to
families are
consider.
being double billed.
So the
You pay
next
your
time you are
regular
standing
income
in that
taxes,
stalled
and then you
airport
pay this
security line,
massive surcharge
checking your
on
watch
your
and hoping you
electric
don't
bill.
miss your flight,
It's
just
incredibly
remember
sneaky.
the
It's
invisible
politically
political
convenient.
machinery
And there's a
grinding away
second layer
behind
to
the
this
scenes.
criticism.
There's so
the
much
sheer
more happening than just
hypocrisy
a
of it
staffing
all.
shortage.
This is the
Absolutely.
most
Thank you for taking
glaring
this
part.
deep dive with us today.
Politicians
We will catch you
constantly
next
tell us
time.